The world marked World Refugee Day, and this weekend, as you saw in that report, Lilian Muli took us to Kakuma, where the Shirika Plan, which aims to integrate refugees into the Turkana community, is in motion. Earlier today, I sat down with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, that is Filippo Grandi, who explains why this is a win-win for both the refugees and host communities. I began by asking him what motivated the transition.
Every year less than the year before, with the whole burden left on Kenya, just created a lot of misery and a lot of instability and insecurity. So we thought the best solution is for people to go back. But look at where they come from. Somalia, South Sudan, very fragile countries. Some people might go back, but it takes time. What do we do in the meantime? And from this reflection came out the conclusion to adopt a different model. Until they can go back, at least include them. Refugees will have more freedom of movement. This will allow them to start more businesses. Remember, if they start businesses, then they will have to pay tax. This is a net advantage for the Kenyan economy. We've already started working on some of these economic opportunities in Kakuma, for example. Dadaab will be a bit more tough, but we'll do that as well. And then, of course, access to schools, to health centers. Now, naturally, Kenyans will say, but if we absorb more people in our education system, in our health system, our systems will be burdened. That's where we are asking the financial institutions like the World Bank, the big donors, to say, instead of putting resources only in refugee camps, put them in Kenyan systems that are serving these refugees.
Why is Dadaab more?
Hope, and I think the president, the government hope as well, that by embarking on this very forward-looking approach, Kenya will attract resources also to address this phenomena. There is also the security element, which is very significant. I am really impressed by Kenya's willingness at all levels, central level, Nairobi level, and county level, to move in this direction.
Is this a plan that has worked elsewhere?
In Uganda, for example, traditionally refugees are fairly included in the communities. They're given land, they're allowed to go to school. In Ethiopia, similar directions.
Do they retain refugee status?
For now, yes, and then we will have to discuss with the government how they want to address that particular issue. Again, this is all very gradual. I understand that for the government it's a big lift, it's a big challenge, also in political terms, but I think that in the end, and we've seen it in other continents, it can bring back some results.
We're talking about 9 million people having been forced from their homes in Sudan. Do you think the world, the international community, is paying enough attention?
We know very well that many countries, and it's not up to me to name and shame.
Do you think the world, the international community, is paying enough attention?
We know very well countries, and it's not up to me to name and shame the type of challenges we're grappling with resources that at best are remaining stable, are not growing.
And what has this meant for the region?
You work in media, you know better than me about communication, you know very well how it is difficult to communicate at the same level of intensity in all these crises. Plus, there are geostrategic interests, so inevitably the attention will move to the crisis that is more current, more geopolitically interesting, involving more big powers. So you had Ukraine, now you have Gaza. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't pay attention. Civilians suffer in those crises as well. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't forget that civilians are suffering in the same way in places like Darfur or North Kivu or some places in the Sahel, and the list is long. And I'm particularly worried, if I may say, by a relative neglect in respect of crisis in Africa. My concern, and I remember expressing this concern very early on, including in discussions we had with President Ruto, with the humanitarians, and he agreed very much with us, this conflict, including its refugee component, has an incredibly killed the principle of the right to seek asylum. If the UK, a permanent member of the Security Council, a country with resources, does that, what am I going to tell countries like Kenya, by the way, or Pakistan, or Colombia, countries that have much less resources, much less global power, and who are actually daily confronted with the arrivals of refugees and are keeping their borders open. South Sudan itself, a foundation of humanity, the right to seek asylum. So I think we need to look at it not just at the last border where things become politicized and difficult, but along these routes, you know, we have to look upstream and upstream to try and stabilize these flows. So unfortunately, that solution, in my opinion, was not very rational, and from the point of view of principle, was not correct.
Royal Media